Jesus didn't feel bad that he had to die for you. He couldn't wait. In fact, he was the lamb slain before the foundation of the world. Before there was even sin, before you ever even failed, God already had a plan to redeem you and do something significant in his eternal purpose that would unite you to himself, that had nothing to do as much with you, but everything with him. All you had to do is say yes. And that's important because here you got another word, covenant. Covenant, it's a new covenant. Jesus said, this is a new covenant in my blood. There was an old covenant and Jesus instituted a new one. It's a solemn agreement between two parties for the purposes of creating and maintaining a successful relationship. Now listen, you don't take communion, you receive communion. There's something you're receiving, there's something you're embracing, there's something you're experiencing when you're involved in communion. It's something you're receiving, it's a living dynamic that's involved in your life. Sacrament, we have sacraments, we have two. We have water baptism, which you saw last week, and today we have communion. It's the Lord's table. It's a sacrament. Sacrament is from the Latin word. It's an oath of allegiance. It's a rite believed to be a means or a visible form of grace. It's a deposit by two parties seeking to secure justice. So two parties come together and they want to secure justice in an area. So they each come and they deposit something so that they can realize and achieve that justice. Do you follow me? We got something that's wrong, some issue between a couple of parties, and they want to see it resolved. They want a judgment in that area. Judgment isn't necessarily bad. Judgment can be good. Have you ever heard there's a judgment in your favor? That can mean that there's a judgment where you win. And really, this sacrament is a judgment in your favor where, bam, God took care of every single issue, every enemy of your soul. God dealt with it. There's a judgment in your favor. You are free. And who the Son set free is free indeed. So God and you are involved in this covenant, involved in this sacrament, involved in this Eucharist. So God makes a deposit and you make a deposit. You ready? So God deposits grace. God deposits his unmerited, undeserving favor. He's absolutely nuts about you. He has always, from day one, been in hot pursuit for family and hot pursuit for mankind. God is crazy about you. He's all in. All in. He's all in everything he has. He even gave his own son. He invested his grace, his favor. You couldn't even fulfill your part of the bargain, so he covered it all. And then your part, what do you deposit? All you have to say is, I believe. I believe that you covered it all. I believe that you have brought me to yourself. I believe that you're nuts about me. And I believe that every promise in your word, every promise that you've said, and I believe nothing can separate me from your love now because you have invested in this. And my part is just saying, yes. If you're just saying yes, you get it. If you're saying more than yes, you literally pollute the whole gospel. And you got a different gospel, and you empty the gospel of its power. Because all you can say is, yes. Religion makes you strive to try to earn it, to try to do it. But this is all about God says, I've made my absolute full total commitment to you. I've covered every single aspect of this covenant. Your part is to just say, I believe it. That's it. All right. Did you get that? All right. I'm going to go to Genesis chapter 14. Genesis chapter 14, going to read 18 to 24. A little bit of it up there, just a part of it. All right, but what are you on there for? Because this is where bread and wine was instituted. So first usages, first places are very important in the principle of interpreting Scripture. Anytime there's a first mention or a first usage, that's the seedbed of how that revelation is going to be unfolded throughout the Word. So it's a hermeneutical principle. It's a way you interpret doctrine. It's a way you practice proper theology. All right, here you go. Abraham, he's recovering his family. His family was stolen from him. Lot, his nephew, and were taken away. So he found 318 people in his own, free men in his own group that went after this army and defeated them. So he went and defeated this army. He recovered everything that was stolen from him. And then he was met by two kings. He was met by the king of righteousness and he was met by the king of Sodom. He was met by the king of righteousness, who was also the king of a place called Salem. Melchizedek, righteousness, king of Salem, which is from the word shalom. What does shalom mean? He is the king of peace. What was Salem? Salem was Jerusalem. Salem. It later became Jerusalem, but Melchizedek, the king of righteousness, was the king of the place called peace. He was the king of righteousness, and he was the king of peace. Who was this Melchizedek, who had no lineage, had no beginning, had no end? Who was he? Bible scholars say he was a theophany. That's a pre-incarnate manifestation of God, or a Christophany, which means it was Jesus Christ before the cross manifesting himself in the flesh. So here is Melchizedek, king of Salem. He brought out bread and wine at this time, celebrating the victory, celebrating the blessing of the Lord on Abraham's life. And Abraham comes. He was the priest of the Most High God, and he blessed him and said, "Blessed be Abraham of our God Most High." He blessed be Abraham of our God Most High, who delivered your enemies into your hand, and he gave him then a tithe of all that he had. He gave him a tithe. This was Jesus, a type of Jesus, and this was Abraham tithing to him, honoring him with the first fruits of anything in his life. And this is way before the law, way before the rules of Moses or the Levitical priesthood. This was a principle established in God. So he gives him a tenth of everything that he has. Now the king of Sodom, he's there too, and he says to Abraham, "Give me the persons and take the goods for yourself." But Abraham said, because Sodom was a king of something else. Sodom was a king of, that area. I mean, the results of those two cities and what they stood for were totally different. But the king of Sodom, he wanted to, somehow get in on this deal with Abraham. And he says, give me the persons, but take the goods for yourself. But Abraham said to the king of Sodom, I have raised my hand to the Lord God, the Most High, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will take nothing, not even a thread or a sandal strap, that I will not take anything that is yours, lest you should say, I have made Abraham rich. We're going to talk about this more at the end of the sermon, but you see that there's these two kings show up, and one is worldly, one is literally demonic and evil, and this one king, he wants to somehow get involved and make Abraham have some kind of responsibility or allegiance to the king of Sodom. But when he had that opportunity with those two kings, he said, I reject you altogether, but you I tithe to, you I honor, you I bless, and to the king of righteousness and the king of peace I will give and I will bless, and I'll come under his reign and his rule. I'll take nothing, not a thread. This world will not be in any way a source of blessing of my life, except only the young men that have gone and they've eaten the portion of them men that went with me, and our Eshcol, Mamre, let them take their portion. So he said, I don't want nothing to do with the king of Sodom and his stuff. I don't want any of that in my world or in my life. I want only the king of righteousness and the king of peace. All right, you get that? Melchizedek. Let's go to Matthew chapter 26. 26 to 30. It says, and they were eating, and Jesus took the bread, and he blessed it, and he broke it, and he gave the disciples. He said to them, take, eat, this is my body. Then he took the cup, and he gave thanks. He said to them, drink of it, all of you, drink of it, all of you, for this is my blood of the new covenant, which was shed for many for the remission of sins. But I say to you, I will not drink of the fruit of this vine now until the day when I drink of it new in my Father's kingdom. And then they sang a hymn. They sang a hymn. I don't know if it was number 48 or 342 in your hymnal, but they sang a hymn, and then they went off to the Mount of Olives. I'll just quickly, Luke chapter 24, 30 and 31. It says, now it came to pass, he sat at the table with them, and he took the bread, and he blessed it, and he broke it, and he gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened. Their eyes were opened. Then their eyes were opened, and they knew him. Now, what's going on here? You got Jesus before the cross telling them that I'm establishing a new covenant. I'm establishing something new. He stepped into a priestly role. He stepped into a priestly office. There's the king. Somebody was not of a priestly line, not of a Levitical line, but somebody of the line of Judah, a king. In the old covenant, you couldn't cross over. Kings were kings, priests were priests, prophets were prophets. But here Jesus is saying, I who come from the kingly line am now going to step into a priestly role. And he right here introduced that I am a priest, but not a Levitical priest. Here he introduced to them that I am the one who's prophesied in the line of Melchizedek. I am the eternal priesthood. I have not come in the priesthood of men, but I am of Melchizedek, that eternal order. I am the Melchizedek to come. I am establishing a new covenant and a new relationship with you. Important stuff. He said, I'm not going to do this again until I see you in my kingdom. That's what he said. But then on the road to Emmaus, after the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ, he appears to these two who are walking away from Jerusalem, walking away from where they were told to be. Jesus catches up to people that are walking away. Isn't that good? Here's two people walking away from the purpose of God in their life. Aren't you glad God always catches up with you? So he catches up to them, and he starts to share. It says from everything. It says the prophets and all through the book of Moses. He began, the living word was breaking the word. And it says they were like, wow, this is amazing. He was about to go on, but they said, stay with us, stay with us. And then it says, when he broke bread, suddenly their eyes were opened. And in the breaking of the bread, they got a revelation that this is Jesus. There's a revelation of who he is. There's a revelation of his kingly role and his priesthood when he manifests himself in the breaking of the bread. And we should expect that even today.